So, thanks for joining in. You should be able to see my screen here. I've got my browser up, and my goal with you tonight is to explain how you get your domain and a little bit about how domains work themselves. So, what we're going to do is first take a visit to name.com. And I'll actually pause for a moment to explain what just happened here. Now, I typed name.com into my browser up in the URL bar, as you can see there. Oh, look, I even got my finger in the right place. And when I do that and hit enter, the domain basically looks up in the internet phone book, if you will. For those of you that know what phone books are, there used to be a phone book for every city. And much like that, in the world of the internet, for every top-level domain, or TLD, top-level domain, like .com, .org, .dev, .app, all of those, there is a phone book specific to that top-level domain. And then, essentially, every other piece of domain that you see from there, so name.com is considered to be a primary domain, and www.name.com would be considered a subdomain. Everything from that point, the top level domain forward, can have its own address book. So sometimes many of these address records, these internet address records, are stored in the records that are associated with all .coms, and sometimes they're sub-branched out. So a large company that manages many, many domains may have essentially their own phone book or internet address book. So my browser goes and contacts that and looks it up, and it gets its IP address. So when you hear about IP addresses, that's all an IP address is just the number that is associated with that name. So I will open up my terminal, and I'm going to type ping name.com. And we're going to see that it actually went into that internet phone book and it looked up name.com and it got back its number. And you'll notice it looks very much like a phone number. In fact, IP addresses, internet protocol addresses, and phone numbers are based off of the same basic switch and routing system. You'll hear people refer to network hardware as routers, such as you might have a Wi-Fi router in your home. Just like in an office building, you might have to dial 9 as an extension to get out of the building, or you might be able to dial as a shortcut someone's extension that's in the building. With the IP system, your home router does local routing, and it essentially dials 9 to get out of the building out to the real world. So this is a real IP address, 107.162.140.96. IP addresses, IPv4, version 4 addresses always have 4 parts, and IPv6 addresses can have a variable number of parts, but we don't talk about those as much, although they're perhaps used just as often or more often at this point. But we'll leave that aside for now because they look more difficult to understand. So anytime I use network software, that lookup happens. When you write your own code, that lookup will most likely happen as part of a library that you use. You won't necessarily have to write the code that does those lookups. So let's get back to name.com. Name.com is my favorite domain registrar because they're very simple and easy to use. They're not very spammy, and they're not very political. So it's a very simple service. I'm already logged in, so I'm going to go to my domains and, my account, my domains. There we go. There's domains to buy domains, and then there's my domains in my account. So I have here a domain, goodtimes.dev, and for our purposes in getting you set up with your own server to be able to host web apps or websites or whatever it is, just go ahead and pick a domain name, something like first name, last name .dev might be a really good one to go with. Or it could be a little more clever than that, but it really doesn't need to be. You can keep it very simple because you're looking at maybe paying up to $20 a year for your domain. And at the beginning, putting a lot of effort into what exactly you want it to be forever and ever doesn't make a lot of sense. You just need something to be able to use and experiment with and put on a resume. So I have here goodtimes.dev, and we'll go into this domain. And there is, no matter which domain service you're using, there is a place to manage DNS. That's that phone book aspect. It's the domain name system. That's the yellow pages of the internet. In fact, in the early days, it was called YP for yellow pages. Later on, it was renamed into DNS for domain name system. So I'm going to click here. It's nice and simple, and I've got a space for an IP address. There's actually different types of addresses. So this area right here is where I can set what devices are associated with my domain. So an A record, A is an IPv4 record. Why they don't call it IP4, I don't really know. But A stands for address. I believe that's what it is. So A is address. MX, you'll also use at some point. That's mail exchange. CNAME means canonical name. We'll talk about this more in a second. TXT means text. And this is used by lots of different services as arbitrary data. When they don't want to come up with a standardized protocol, they want what we might call an ad hoc protocol. They'll create a very simple text-based protocol that might be separated by commas or semicolons or something like that. And you can put in arbitrary text data. There's Srv records, which are kind of the more elegant way to do what most services are doing with TXTs. Srv records are meant for services. Particularly devices in your home may use Srv records, like your Xbox, or things like Skype might use those for your local network to be able to figure out which device has the streaming service for the video feed or the game stream or whatever it is. Quad A records. This is so confusing, but you can remember it because it's confusing. Quad A records are for IPv6. And name server records we don't really need to worry about. A name records we'll get to those in a bit too. So what I've got here is a place where I can put a domain or subdomain. I can leave this blank. I'm actually going to put in, this is a very special IP address. It is what's called the loopback address. It means home. So my computer's address is 127.0.0.1. Your computer's address is also 127.0.0.1. Every computer, every device, your Xbox, your Nintendo, your DVD player, all devices have an IP address 127.0.0.1, and that is its home address or loopback address or local host address. It's called all those things. So I'm just going to set this for the sake of showing you, and I'll make this a little smaller, see if we can get this to fit in here a little better. I don't know, that's too small to read now. Catch 22. All right. So this says time to live is 300. I didn't set an A record. Let me go back to an A record. I'm going to put my IPv4 address. And tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to set up a server, and we're going to use the server's IP address in here. Today I'm just giving you the overview of what domains are, kind of how they work, and how the domain name system works. So now if I were to ping goodtimes.dev, let me bring this up. We're going to see that it gets back that its address is 127.0.0.1, and it's actually my computer just talking to itself. As opposed to before, we had a public IP address, and my computer was talking to the name.com servers. Now, oftentimes, when we have a subdomain such as www, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in here, we use a CNAME or canonical name, and I'll put the www, And what I'll say is that the canonical address for www.goodtimes.dev is whatever the address of goodtimes.dev is. So if I click to add this record, I'm going to use a different tool this time. I'm going to use dig, which is like ping, just sends a special packet and gets back a response, and it's usually used to check whether or not a server is up and exists. Dig doesn't check to see if the server that belongs to the domain is up or responding to requests. It just gives back the information about the domain itself, its address parts. So we should see this momentarily. I'm going to dig www.goodtimes.dev, and dig is doing exactly what we talked about with the browser. It's going to that yellow pages, the internet yellow pages, the domain name system for .dev. It's looking up good times, and then from there it's checking to see if there's a www associated with good times. And here we can see what we get back are two records. There's a question that was asked, what is www.goodtimes.dev? And the answer it got back was www.goodtimes.dev is a CNAME, or has the CNAME, the canonical name, goodtimes.dev. And in order to prevent a round trip of dig having to go ask again, okay, now what is goodtimes.dev? The name server goes ahead and gives back the address of goodtimes.dev as well. So it says goodtimes.dev as an A record, an IPv4 address, A for address, is 127.0.0.1. So this is pretty common. Now, in some cases you can't use a CNAME, and that's where an A name comes in. So we're going to show you an A name. Not all services support A names. One of the great things about name.com is that it does. So I will put here sub.goodtimes.dev, and I'm going to give it the answer goodtimes.dev. The A name is just a shortcut for the places where you can't use a CNAME. It's just a cross between A plus CNAME. So when I do a dig on let me make sure that you can see me here. Goodtimes.dev. Sorry if that was a little small earlier. And I'll actually clear the screen out. Don't look at that yet. I'm going to clear the screen out. I'm going to run it again. Okay. What you'll notice that's different is that this returns an A record. So I was able to use the word goodtimes.dev, but what got returned was the final destination, which was, let me regather my thoughts here. I clicked on the wrong thing first. So what I defined was sub.goodtimes.dev, and I defined it as goodtimes.dev, and it did the lookup all at once and returned back the answer as an A record without a CNAME. And these are the three records that I think are the most important and the most common that you'll use. An A record is the exact address as a number. The CNAME is a pointer to another address which has the number or perhaps another pointer. And the A name is something that skips that process, that you can give it a name just like you can with a CNAME, but it returns an address directly. So with that out of the way, tomorrow we will be setting up a server on DigitalOcean. I want you to go ahead and get a domain through name.com or somewhere else if you prefer. I totally think that it is worth spending. You might have to pay $1 or $2 more versus some other name service. But as we go forward, I really want you to be using name.com, because as we start to program, we may use some of the tools that are available here that are very nice and very easy to use, that are much more difficult or complicated, and that I won't be able to personally explain to you if you're using some other service. So that's another reason. If you are told by someone, oh, you can go to this domain registrar and it's $1 cheaper or $2 cheaper, even if it's $5 cheaper, we're talking about the realm of $12 to $20 here. Don't shortchange yourself on saving a couple of dollars when you want to be able to use the same thing that the rest of us are using and to have it work easily and well. So I recommend name.com. Pick a domain, doesn't matter. Pick one of the domains that they have on sale that renews for that range of $12 to $20. Pick a dumb name. Pick just your first name and last name. Just pick something so that you have it and you own it. And then tomorrow we'll go in with DigitalOcean. And there is another service that we could use, which is called DuckDNS. So if you're really averse to spending any money right now, you can use this. They do have the bare minimum that we're going to need for setting up the server tomorrow, but it's not as nice as the tools that we have with name.com. So with that out of the way, feel free to drop me any questions in the comments. Oh, I see one comment came up right now. So what is the number 300? Yes, let me explain that. I started to explain it and I didn't. Thank you for bringing that up. This is time to live. This means that after 300 seconds, which ends up being about 5 minutes, exactly 5 minutes, the name and address will expire. So when you visit a website like google.com, your local Wi-Fi router at home will keep a copy of that address so that the next time a program goes to ask, what is the answer, what is the address for this domain name, it will already have it there. If you set the TTL low, then it will expire soon, which means that you can change it often. When we're doing development and we're messing with different servers, we don't want it to last for hours or days because we want to be able to mess around, make a mistake, have to destroy a server, spin up another server, change the IP address, and keep going. As far as when I'm going to be doing these, I'm intending to do the Beyond Code Lives in the morning. In the evening. And I don't have an exact time that I can do every day because my schedule is slightly different between Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. However, tomorrow I intend to do the live stream at 7:30 Mountain Time, and you should see a scheduled event come out for that. So if you're looking to join at that specific time on Tuesday, tomorrow, that's the time that it should be at. Yes, you are welcome. I don't think that I had anything else to say about TTL. Let me think for 1 second. So it's the time to live. It can be cached by things like your router. If the time to live is longer and your router has enough memory, it'll keep more of it. Otherwise, it'll keep less of it. And beyond your router, there's a router at your internet service provider, such as Comcast or Roadrunner. I don't remember the names of all the ISPs throughout the United States and Europe. I think Vodafone is one. Or maybe they just do phone service. Anyway, you have different routers that are kind of in layers and different domain name services that are in layers. And when the TTL goes through, the number actually decreases as it goes. So at the top level, it might have been set for 300 seconds, but that top level will send however many seconds are left, so 215, and so on and so forth as it propagates. So it could be that when your router gets the address, it only has 1 second left, and so it won't keep the cache. That's another thing to know about the time to live. This is the maximum time. If you hit it right when it renews, the longest it will be is 300 seconds. All right, other than that, I don't think we've got any other questions. So go ahead, get a domain. Don't fret about the $20. Get it through name.com, and I will catch you tomorrow. Adios.